Greetings to one and all, it's your old buddy Jay here, coming at you with some more countermeasures goodness. I would firstly like to say thanks very much for all of the support. The likes and subscriptions are really helping me grow the channel, so thank you very much again for that. Today I would like to put forward an interview which I recently did with Nick Morrish, who is a professional photographer. I took him through the 10-question marathon. We looked at his journey through this creative industry and the highs and lows of working with graphic designers like myself. He is also Welsh, which we won't hold against him, so hopefully you should enjoy that. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, that's great. You can also download the audio file, which is all good podcast outlets. I will put the link down below in the descriptor, or you can just search for Countermeasures Podcast and you should find it. Now, all that's left to say is take my hand and come with me as we once again dive into my deep, deep design pocket and learn more about the journey of a photographer in 2020. Hi, Nick. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Have we actually started?
We've started now, yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
That was we were just in the green room.
Oh, right, okay, nice.
This is the interview. So yeah, so this is it. So yeah, welcome to Countermeasures. And this is the creative lockdown series, apparently. And yeah, I just thought that this is the second podcast, and I thought it might be interesting to hear of your creative journey from being a wee Ben to the gentleman you are today. And so I've sent you 10 questions, which range from sort of early days through to your sort of current status, which is locked in your house, same as everybody else. And yeah, I just thought we'd sort of have a chat. And it doesn't matter, we can roll on for 4 hours, or we could be done in half an hour, or whatever. It's just yeah, there's no, it's just a conversational thing. So we can.
Well, I'm absolutely privileged, obviously, to be the second guest. I'm not
I like where you were like the second, not the first.
Yeah, the second. I'm going to point it out. I'm not competitive, but no, it's fair play. I hope it's interesting for people, really. But 4 hours, or the hour and 45 minutes that Cars 2 is on, that is keeping my toddler busy.
Yeah, well, you can always start it again.
We'll see how this goes. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
Great. Yeah. Hello. Yeah, I don't know if we have any subscribers or well, I've got 24 subscribers to the YouTube channel so far. So that it's a low, but like a lot of people don't subscribe to these things, like they do, like on they'll watch it on Facebook and stuff like that, but they won't necessarily. So I get lots of registered people watching it, so that's all coming up, but people don't always hit the subscribe button. So not everyone watches stuff on YouTube in that way either. So that's what I keep telling myself. There's 24 so far. So at this rate, we'll have 100 by 2027. Hopefully.
Well, I got to say, I really enjoyed the first episodes, the history of graphic design and stuff. And I'm going to clearly shamelessly copy that in my
that's fine. That's fine.
Everything
lockdown. I've ever done is stolen, so feel free to. I'll happily be part of that. It's been quite good because obviously in the current lockdown scenario, my work's I'm working. I've got a few bits and pieces going on, but it's nothing like a normal working day week. So I'm suddenly finding that I've got this extra time to think about like other things and stuff that I'd like to have done by now. Book's on its way. So, and one of the things was to start a podcast, and then that sort of turned into doing like a YouTube thing because I wanted to write something. I thought, well, I'll write a sort of history of graphic design and try not to bore myself. And and then it's just sort of turned into this, which it's been great. It's been really good fun. And also I'm teaching myself Premiere as things go along, which you probably know a lot about, but I know very little about. So, I know the basics to patch stuff together. And now I know a lot more because with the extra time, of course. It's been great. So, so let's let me stop talking, basically,
No,
and
no, no,
we'll
it's
start
great.
on the first
This is the
question. So,
easiest interview I've ever had.
yeah, so it's been great to have
It's
you.
great.
Yeah, so the first question, one of 10, is when do you first remember yourself leaning towards being creative?
Well, this was a really interesting question. Or am I meant to pretend like I'm doing this off the top of my head? What's your...
Well, it
Am I...
depends. Is your other half just holding up like a board with all the answers on?
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
1978.
No, do you know what? Actually, no. I mean, when you sent this question through, it's a really interesting question because I've never thought about it, and I don't really consider myself to be creative. Like, you know, and I'm not trying to be, you know, sort of the clever artist or whatever, but I fell into it very, very, very late. And when I was at school, I didn't really do anything creative. Like, you know, one of my friends from school is an architect, and it was all he wanted to do. He was drawing buildings and stuff. I was a bit more of a relaxed student. There was sort of parties to go to, and, you know,
Yeah.
football to play.
Yeah.
Above a certain age, obviously, nothing illegal. And you know, so that was sort of what took my mind. So I guess the first time that I really sort of started to try something creative was actually playing guitar. You know, an angsty teenager, you need a backing track to go with all those melancholy songs about, you know, being a 15-year-old in Cardiff.
Were you writing your own songs, or were you playing other people's?
Both. Yeah. Okay. I mean, you know, I would not. I mean, funnily enough, I did find a cassette tape with one recording from one band.
Please lean out of the shot now and just pick your guitar up and play your first song. That would make my day.
It's pretty horrific. You know, so yeah, that side of it. But yeah, you know, like playing guitar, expressing yourself musically. I guess that was the first time that I found myself being creative. And then in terms of photography, it's a bit more different because my dad was a really keen amateur back in the day, and a very good photographer as well. Even though he won't admit it, I've seen his slides, and, you know, they're great. But so
that's when photography was much harder than it is today.
Oh, yeah.
Because, like, you know, everyone with an iPhone and portrait mode is suddenly, you know, David Bailey, you know, they're all kind of, but back then it was like, you know, you had to really think about the light and you know, staying still.
Well, absolutely, like that, yeah. You know? Well, he's not that old. It wasn't like the old, you know, bellows camera in the 1800s. But no, I mean,
loading the gunpowder into the flash,
Yeah, no, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's frightening how it's come on. And I mean, you know, when I think about it, I mean, I actually started taking pictures properly. I mean, well, you know, I was given a little Kodak Extra camera, which is one of the long, thin ones. I used to take.
Oh, I know. Were they the side loading? Was it the one where you?
Yeah, I think you put the cartridge in the back and.
Yeah, but when you took a picture, did you do the like that to read? Go on to the next. Yeah.
And so, you know, whatever, took some pictures on that. But then I sort of started getting into photography proper when I was sort of 16, I guess. And I borrowed my dad's old OM1 film camera, which to this day, I mean, it's an absolute beauty to use. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I love the modern technology and stuff, but, you know, there's just something solid and, you know, nice sound as the shutter goes and stuff. So I started taking pictures of that using some of my dad's old, like, you know, books, learning about, you know, teaching photography.
Yeah.
So I used to go and take pictures of trees and sheep and, you know, all sorts of stuff.
Well, you're in Wales. Is there anything else?
Not really. No.
Trees and sheep.
Trees and sheep, yeah.
They're taking over the streets now, those sheep. I keep seeing reports of Welsh villages being overrun by wild sheep.
There is something nice about, you know, the sheep finally getting the upper hand on, you know.
I saw one with a banner that said, "We're reclaiming our land." And someone had a pitchfork.
Yeah. So that was sort of 16, started taking pictures, whatever. It was when I got to uni that I think the creativity and photography started to kick off. And,
did you start on a photography course for uni then? Did you literally just sign up for that?
No, I went and did American Studies
Okay.
as my degree,
Right.
only because, I mean, you're going to regret saying that I could go on a tangent, but I always wanted to be a pilot when I was younger. But
Okay.
the careers advisor, who was she was a very strict lady who'd seen, I think she'd seen a lot of life and
Mm.
a lot of dreams be crushed mercilessly. She
Like,
was it's almost like she was like, well, I wanted to be a nuclear physicist and
yeah.
I didn't do that, and so
Mm.
here I am telling you not to be a pilot, and I mean, to be fair though, I mean, I don't think I could be a pilot. It's such a great skill and stuff. But I remember the day that I walked into the careers office, and she said, "Well, let's go through your likes and dislikes." And she said, "What do you like?" "Well, I like flying, and I like the outdoors, and I like
Mm.
all that stuff." But trying to sort of,
Edge
you know,
yourself towards the pilot career.
yeah,
Yeah, I like
yeah, yeah,
I like uniforms. I
yeah, yeah.
like,
I like global travel. I
yeah,
want to, sit at the front of a plane,
yeah,
and I can never remember the name of it, but you remember you used to get those long sheets of paper that you could take the sides off.
yeah, yeah. I can't remember either, but it was like
Yeah,
they were sort of tiered like that, weren't they? And they would sort of
yeah,
fold
that's
off.
right.
And,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's it.
sort of
Was
dot
it?
matrix printing or whatever. Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. One of those came off the printer,
Mm.
and it was about 6 foot long, and right at the end of it, it went, "He won't be a pilot." And it was that, it was that
Computer
moment that,
says no.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And she said that I'd be better suited to be a runway technician, which was chasing the pigeons off the runway
Right.
for the pilots. Which, I mean,
Was
I'm
she laughing when
16.
she said it? Was she like, you'll be chase the
She was
pigeons?
she was deadly serious,
Yeah.
and I'm sort of sitting there thinking, well, I don't want to do that. And, so anyway, long story short, that's how I ended up doing American Studies, because I didn't know
Mm.
what else I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But I got a year in America out of it. So
Yeah.
I went to uni for this year, and I met some other photographers and in my first and second year, and,
Hmm.
I used to take pictures and all that sort of stuff. But it was when I got to America that it really dawned on me that actually I wanted to go into a creative
Yeah.
profession and
Yeah.
be a photographer.
Yeah.
I got a job on the student newspaper out in Penn State University,
Yeah.
with uh, possibly the. Am I allowed to swear? Is that?
You can, yeah, go
Yeah,
for
yeah.
it. Go for it. Say whatever you like.
It was the shittest portfolio. You will. I mean, to this day, I'm like, it's a miracle. That,
Was it
that
just
I got,
like trees, sheep, trees?
it was worse than that. It was literally about 20 pictures from a weekend that I'd spent watching rugby at
Hmm.
the university with the
Okay.
other international students.
Yeah.
And basically, I got my place because I was from Britain,
Hmm.
and the picture editor was like, well, look, like, we come to uni to learn, to expand our horizons, and why not have this guy in, because he might not be able to take a picture, but he can teach us about Britain and different culture and all
Okay.
that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So I sort of snuck in the creative industry through the back door.
Yeah. Okay.
Really, I started taking pictures for the paper, and we were taught, by a professional, how to take a proper picture. And that was when it really sort of grabbed me, and I realized that was what I wanted to do. So the short answer to the last like 10 minutes is I was about 21.
Yeah. So I guess it's interesting, isn't it? Because like for me, and I was talking on the other podcast with my friend John. We went to school together, so we had similar sort of experience, which was we both liked being sort of quite arty and doing drawings and writing stuff from quite an early age. That eventually sort of you follow this path where you just keep funneling down to eventually end up with a career that's somewhere a combination of those sort of arty things, So whereas like like yourself and a lot of other people I know, they had it like a completely disconnected experience in that way. And as much as they did lots of other different things when they were younger, they probably spent more time doing sports than I did. I'm sure you played more football and rugby than I ever did. And then
Yeah.
suddenly they've kind of reached this point where they're like, oh, actually, I really enjoy this and I just haven't done enough of it, or I want to explore it more. So it's
Yeah, yeah,
interesting
yeah.
that still comes along, because I've worked with you for years, and you're really creative and
Oh,
you're really good at your job, and I can't imagine you doing anything else. I mean, I'm not sure if I got on a plane and someone said Nick Morrish is flying this plane, that I'd want to get on it.
That's
but if they
fair
said
enough.
he's doing a photo shoot on this plane, I'd definitely get on it.
Yeah.
So like, I
Yeah,
do
I don't
think
know.
it's interesting how that you
Mm.
ended up there regardless of like I mean, I suppose you kind of maybe always had it going on in the background anyway, with your dad being a photographer, and having that as a
Yeah,
base, that maybe
yeah.
you kept touching back to.
Well, I think that's quite interesting actually, because actually, yeah, I mean, Dad is a creative guy. I mean, um, he did loads of drawings. I mean, and I've got some, and they're absolutely incredible. And he probably could have made a living out of doing proper sort of artwork.
Yeah.
And I don't mean the guy doing the caricature, at Piccadilly Circus. I mean, although that is a skill, but
Yeah.
he did these great life drawings and stuff. But I think the difference maybe between me and him is that I was encouraged much more to go for, like, don't get me wrong, I remember the conversation. I said, "Oh, Dad, I'll be a photographer." He said, "Well, you'll never make any money."
Yeah.
But he was fully behind me, and he was like, "Well, look, if
Sure.
that's what you want to do, that's what you're going to do." Whereas I think he grew up in a time when you had to be a bank manager,
Yeah.
shop manager, whatever.
Absolutely. It was much harder to
Yeah,
get into that kind of career. Same with like design and and photography. It was you didn't know that many designers and photographers. I think around that time. Like you said, people had like proper jobs. Whereas now the only people I know are photographers and designers. So it's now much more accessible for everybody. Whereas back then, I think if you were an illustrator, you probably had to already be working in some big ad company or design. You had to be connected somehow, to get a leg up. Whereas now you can follow your own path rather than hope that everything just aligns.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I should say, in case Mum and Dad are listening, that obviously my mum was equally as creative, and she was.
And I love her too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Better not forget that. But she one of the jobs. I mean, she did quite a few things, but she was cabin crew for BA for a few years. But
I didn't know that. Okay, so you've got roots in BA. So
oh yeah,
photography. Wanted to be a pilot.
I literally sort of well, maybe it was predestined, I don't know, but no, I mean, she used to do food prep and stuff, so for photography, photo shoots and videos and stuff, so she had a bit of creativity in her as well, so I guess and she's a fabulous baker, which is a creative art. So I think that, it was in there, and I was given the opportunity to go and do it, and luckily avoided the well, I mean, I did my work experience just after the careers advice in going places. I don't know if you remember the old travel agents.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
Which was ironic because I didn't go anywhere.
And neither did they.
No. I was in the basement for a week sorting through old catalogues, and
wasn't their identity like going places but with a question mark on the end?
I think it was. Yeah. And then they went out of business, but nothing to do with my work experience. I'm sure.
No.
But I mean, I couldn't have done that. I mean, and when I look back on it now, I couldn't have worked in an environment that was so sort of regimented in a way. I mean, I've had jobs in shops and stuff, and the people are obviously lovely, but it's that the red lines are so tight on everything that you do.
Yes.
Compared to the creative world, where a brief comes in, you go absolutely mad with all these ideas, and it slowly gets chopped back in, but you're given the freedom to go out and try something.
Yeah.
And then then the lasso from the client or the budget or whatever comes and
but somewhere but those projects end up being successful. Either they either let you run with it and you're like, I can't believe they let me do that, or they give you the the world, and then they like you said, they slowly chip it down, and eventually it ends up being still part of it ends up being creative in the way you wanted, which is very satisfying in its own right, in knowing that it did, your influence did change it in some way. But yeah, no, it's a interesting industry. Like photography, like my father was a photographer as well, and still is, but he used to do wedding photography for a long time, and my mum was very arty as well. So like like you, having that kind of support from early on, it wasn't any surprise when I said, oh, I'm going to go into like an arty career, because they both were kind of arty and could understand it, even though they didn't do that for their jobs necessarily. It's like, because my dad's business was like a side business and everything for the wedding photography. But I think, like you said, with your parents having some understanding of what it means to a person personally to be creative in that way, they obviously just thought, well, he's gonna go off and do this. We know why. You'll be broke, but but you know what?
You'll be
but
happy.
Actually, you'll be broke and happy. Yeah, but actually, that's broke in the sense of what it would have been like back then. How their mentality would have been thinking about getting that business going, or be, whereas now you can make a lot of money being a photographer. As as your LA office, I can see, dictates.
Well, yeah. I was wondering if you guessed whether I was in Cardiff or LA based on the sunshine that's out the window.
I was going to say, when the backdrop just falls down and the palm trees blowing around, then I'll know that.
Oh, hang on, David Hasselhoff is at the door. In a second.
Yeah, the ice is in the fridge. Yeah. Cool. So that was sort of question, and we did dovetail into sort of question 2 there, which was the sort of your education side of things and sort of filtering into university. So having a completely unrelated sort of education to photography meant that you pretty much taught yourself.
Yeah, pretty much, and it's something that I find quite interesting, because whenever you're approached by a parent of somebody who wants to go into photography, one of the first questions is always, oh, what course did you do to get into photography? Well, I think obviously there is a value in doing a college degree or whatever in photography, but I think there's also a danger that knowingly or not, the course tutor is always going to put their own influence onto your style. So you're going to copy what they are saying, and you're not really going to find your own sort of way of doing things.
Sure.
So I was sort of lucky that I knew how to take a photograph and do all that stuff. Then I went to the collegiate and got sort of a more focused sort of education on what makes a good photograph in terms of composition and looking at things differently and what suits for newspapers.
Yeah.
And then when I came back, I actually got onto the NCTJ press photography course in Sheffield, which was then, a real intense look at, being a press photographer in the UK and the laws and, how you approach certain jobs and, what to look out for and what not to do and all that sort of stuff. So, but the whole time it was more, my education was more around the, how do you do your job, rather than this is how you take a picture of X thing. Yeah. So I found that helped me really. It sounds awful as well. I don't know if you find this with sort of, other creatives, but I think especially with photography, you can get so bogged down in the technical side of it that it takes away something from the creative side. And I mean, there are, I hear questions. And I'm like, well, I don't know the answer to that about, I don't know. Well, once I was asked about the operating temperature of my camera, like what was the minimum temperature it would work in outdoors before it froze. And I think the person was sort of taken aback a little bit when I said, well, I don't know really, but I do know that if I have to go out and it's -20 outside, I'll do my best to make sure the camera doesn't pack up. But at the end of the day, I've got to get a picture. I'm not going to say, oh, sorry, it was a bit cold. You've just got to, you can take the most perfectly exposed photograph in the history of the earth. It could be absolutely spot on. But if it's dull to look at, well, you've got to get that other side of it, that sort of, that feeling and that, the composition and the emotion that you're trying to portray. There's that element which, you can control with the technical side of it, of course, but a lot more of it is a feeling and
Yeah,
and that creativity.
but that's where your creative side comes into play, because like
Mm.
the technology is always changing anyway. Okay, the basics, but technology changes always, so you're always having to keep on
Mm.
top of that. And it's the same with design as it is with photography, which
Mm.
is like, I learn one app one week and it changes the next, so you're constantly
Yeah.
having, the ground's shifting all the time, so you're
Mm.
constantly got to keep on top of that. But regardless of what that technology is, the principle of the creative side of it is always the same, which
Mm.
is like, how you handle people, what you're
Mm.
like in environments with
Mm.
people, how how you deal with people that don't want their photograph being taken, how you make them relax. And you don't have much time to do that. And I've worked with you and other photographers, and that is something that I always find quite sort of interesting, how quickly someone can go from being totally frozen.
Yeah.
You say sort of like 2 or 3 magic words to them, and suddenly they're like loosening up and getting ready for their sort of bikini shoot.
Yeah, well, it's
And
all hypnotism.
yeah,
There's no trick. It's just that look into the eyes.
yeah, not around the eyes, and
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's something that's always, because I, I've done art director shoots and things, and I'm kind of okay at that, but I'm amazed at how, you especially very good at that, sort of getting people who don't want their photograph, or they feel like, oh, I'll go last and all that sort of stuff. When you're doing a
Yeah.
load of people, by the time they come along and they have they're loving it, and that's a real skill.
Yeah.
That sort of people management.
I think that's what I enjoy about photography is, funnily enough, what was it? It was the end of December. I was doing something, and it was, it was a BA. I was doing this sort of set of portraits for one of the societies there, and the guy who I was doing it for said, like, this one lady, I'd love to get her picture, but she's really, really nervous. She's really, really nervous. And down she came with a friend, and the friend had his picture taken. And, I was trying to sort of, gently cajole her in front of the camera, but she just didn't want to do it. And I mean, short of tying her shoelaces together and, sort of getting her as she tries to hop off down the street. I mean, there's no point in pushing it. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what my success rate is, but she's the only one that I can remember in the recent time that has absolutely said point blank, I do not want to have my photograph taken. And I tried everything,
I guess,
short of calling you in to give me a hand. It was
well, you definitely wanted to make sure she didn't want it taken. I guess, but you must have experience with that, where people just sort of lock horns and just like, no, I don't want to do it. And I guess if you've got to deliver their picture for whatever, whatever it's for, getting them to do it must be quite tricky. I can't imagine if you can't do it, Nick, it can't be done, basically.
Well, I hope that's not the case. No, I mean, it's an interesting.
So have you been following her since then? Are you like she's the one that got away? It's like, I know where she lives. The other day I saw her having her photo taken loads of times.
No, I wasn't that desperate to get her picture, to be honest. No, I mean, it's a funny thing. I know, there are some photographers that I think would be a bit more like, but at the end of the day, it's a picture, isn't it? It's not gonna, change the world or anything. Well, it might have done, actually.
Could do.
God, maybe I should have taken a picture, actually. Yeah, maybe I should have kept on
the
it.
one that got away.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I just want people to be happy, so I'm not going to make them feel uncomfortable or anything like that.
Of course, So when you came back, and back was from America to Wales. So when did you make the sort of transition to London? Now? Did that come? Was your going places kind of experience, was that London based? Or were you...
No, that was Cardiff. That was
Cardiff,
yeah, that was Cardiff. No, it's funny, the London thing. I was never that bothered by it at the start of my career, because I think I was still in absolute shock that I was able to get onto the press photography course in Sheffield, which at the time was, the press photography course, and any press photographer working in the national press had gone through it, and the list of names of people who'd been through there before, it was just eye-watering. It's unbelievable. So I was shocked first that I was on the course. Then I ended up getting a job back in Wales, in Newport, for the South Wales Argus, and I spent 4.5 absolutely bonkers years there. You know, like really like
So
learning.
was the Argus a newspaper then? Was that
Yeah.
right,
Of course, I drop it in the Argus.
yeah,
Everywhere.
yeah.
It's a local paper. It's but Wales is one of those weird situations where, like, the national paper, I think the circulation was like 40,000 or something, and I think
Right.
we were 30,000. So,
Okay.
you know, it was quite a good experience.
Good
And
coverage. Yeah.
yeah, and the team of photographers there were just, I mean, you know, I mean, a really, really talented pool of people. And so I learned, you know, quite a lot from them. And it was only, I guess, after about 4 years that I started to think of going to London. But on my way to London, I actually went to Reykjavik for a little while, just to have a go at being a freelance photographer up there,
Okay.
which didn't really work out great, because it was the 2008 banking crash that did it for me then. And also, like, I didn't know the language. I didn't have any business acumen.
So did you just quit your job? Was it full time you were there? You quit and just thought, I want to go and do something. So just going back to your newspaper days for a sec, what was your what was your sort of day-to-day working there then? Were you just like following journalists around, or were you getting sent off on missions? What was the kind of how that worked?
So it was quite interesting. I mean, I know it's a cliche, but no 2 days were the same. And I mean, genuinely, they weren't. I mean, you know, we would have on the diary about 4 or 5 jobs a day. You know, we work in shifts as well. So weekends would be on sport. You might be working nights where you'd be the only photographer and on call. But yeah, you do a real mix of stuff. So there was the real sort of hard news of, you know, court snatches, you know, getting the crims as they came out of court, you know, murder scenes, road crashes, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But then on the other end of the scale, you had all these lovely fluffy jobs where, you know, it might be, you know, a local who won a golf competition. So you know, go up to wherever it was and try and do something creative and, you know, with a golf ball and a thing that wasn't just him, you know, with the golf club over his shoulder like he's just taking a shot. So you would get those pictures for, you know. And in fact, actually, that's fun.
I think that's quite fun though. That, you know, you must have seen some, you know, budgies on roller skates in your time, you know.
Oh yeah. Do you know what, the one that I always think about was I got sent to a pub that had been flooded, and they'd come together, like the team had come together to clear out the basement so they could reopen. And it was one of those, like, if they went through insurance, it would take like 30 years to reopen, but if they did it themselves, they could get open in a week. So they did it. So obviously they were quite happy. And, you know, and it's sort of not really the most thrilling of stories. I mean, it's a lovely story, but you know, picture wise, you've kind of got a pub that's, you know. So I had a chat with the owner, and he was a lovely bloke, and I said, look, you know, and he was in one of these yellow oilskin like whaling outfits.
Oh, okay. Right.
And I said, look, mate, I said, you know, I'll do the pictures, you know, and we'll do this and that. I said, but I got an idea, you know, would you be up for it? And basically what I wanted was 2 shoots of water coming in either side and hitting it and doing it on a you know, quick shutter, so you've got
cool,
the water and stuff. And he was holding his brush, and he was like, yeah, mate, you know, he said, I'm, you know, cloud 9 that the place is going to be open, so, you know, let's do it, let's, you know. So we did it in a couple of takes. He got absolutely soaked. Went back to the picture desk, did my pictures, took it up to the picture editor, and I said, well, you know, I've got this. I said, I don't, you know, I don't want to be, I think it's a front page image, you know, like, look at this is, you know, really good fun. And know, and he took it into the editor, who you know, like a lot of regional editors at the time, I think they were sort of you know, sort of very traditional and whatnot. And he took one look at the photo and said, is Nick Morrish on drugs? Do we need to drug test him? Needless to say, I don't think the picture made it, but it was a favourite. You
learned a lot about the newspaper that day. You learned about your place in the world.
Yeah. But the great thing about it was the picture editor, you know, and he came out and he told me, and it was, you know, it's funny and whatnot. And I don't think the editor really thought I was on, you know, on anything, but like, he still encouraged me. He said, like, don't let it stop you. You know, don't ever go out, and just because you've been told it doesn't work now doesn't mean that something will come up. And
Yeah.
I mean, in hindsight, I mean, the 20 whatever I was, 25-year-old in me is going, oh, it's great, it's a Pulitzer Prize winner, that one. But
Yeah.
now, what has that got to do with clearing water out of a basement after
Yeah,
a
but it
flood?
was a
You know
good
what I mean?
idea. But what I like
Yeah,
about that is that, like, you took something that was quite sort of, a sort of mundane situation, if you like, that you were just covering, and you thought, well, we can do those photos, we can get that, there's option one, and we
yeah,
could try this other thing, and like in trying that other thing, while it wasn't successful, it's part of being of that sort of creative thinking of sort of going, right, let's just do something totally different. It's like when we've done shoots in the past and we've ticked the boxes of the things that we need to do. At the end, we'll always be like, right, what else could we do that we haven't? What we could go a bit off the wall, and 9 times out of 10 it doesn't pay off. But the one time it does, it's always great, because you're just like, that was like a last minute thing, or someone had an idea to do this, and it just fitted, So it's good, and it's good that you got encouragement to do it. But that's good, because obviously, with him encouraging you to do that, it didn't completely shut you down and be in a kind of like, right, I'm just like a corporate shill now, I'll just do whatever. It allow you to sort of think, actually, when you get those opportunities, you should always do them. I've done plenty of like design work where I'm like, here's your logo, but look at this one. And then some people are like, wow. And other people are like, what the yeah, I just never stop doing that though. Because that's always, that's stuff that ends up in your folio. It's
and do you know what? And I think that's one of the biggest things, that with young photographers, especially, I think it's so easy to stay within your shell because you don't want to do something wrong, or you've just got to go for it. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Just move on. But don't ever, like you say, don't ever stop.
Find your voice. And that's
absolutely.
a hard thing to do when you're young, because you're looking to, a lot of people, like you said, a lot of people are sort of telling you, this is how you're a photographer, this is how to be a photographer, and then they show you their work, and you're like, oh, that's how to do it. Whereas it's not like, you are sort of, you end up sort of following a path in those younger years of like mimicking a lot of the people that you love, and like for me, like designers, like copying a lot of their work and thinking it's my own amazing idea, and that sort of stuff. Because you have no other point to reference, and as you get older, you start to find your own voice in that respect, and you get more confident in showing them the guy getting hit by the water. Now you would show that picture and you'd be like, I don't care if you like it, I love it. And I think that's important. So then you went to, did you say Reykjavik? You went to?
I did, just take a bit of time out, but it didn't, it was great, don't get me wrong, because I surrounded myself by artists and really creative people, and I learned a lot about creativity there. Sort of, it was like another education, really. But it was just the wrong time, and and I didn't speak the language. I really sort of set myself up against it. But then, but from there, I ended up in London, and basically, it's as unglamorous as I saw a job advert, and I was like, well, why not?
I'll do that.
And it turned out that job advert was for an agency that was working with British Airways, and that was how I got my foot in the door.
Was it a photography agency? Was it a photographic agency? Or was it
No, it was content. It was content agency, and they were producing the weekly newspaper for staff, called the BA News, which was, it was a lovely publication. It's, at heart, I'm a newspaper man, so anything that's,
editorial based.
I'm just love newspapers, love print. And but they were switching it from a weekly magazine to a monthly. Did I say weekly magazine? A weekly newspaper to a monthly magazine.
Okay.
And and they sort of like what I did, and they like my sort of attitude to stuff. So
you had likes planes written on your CV still,
well,
which went a long way.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, funnily enough, actually, apart from the fact I got a picture of a plane there, I love. Do you know what? I got laughed at when I said this in the office once. I love the art of flying, like the sort of science behind it and stuff. But like planes, I'm sort of like, yeah, you
quite
know,
ugly things. Yeah, yeah, but
yeah.
yeah,
I don't get as excited about it as other people. Which people then are like, well, how did you work BA for 10 years?
yeah.
Well, you know, I think that was part of the, you know, that I wasn't out on the runway just photographing endless planes. I don't know, but
That's right. Yeah.
so yeah, so that was how I came back to London, and it was it was great, you know, great place to work,
Hmm.
and well, I say London, I mean it was right on the edge of the M25. It was just about London.
Yeah,
Wasn't,
yeah.
you know, I wasn't riding a Segway into Hoxton
Yeah.
the Pret
Not
end every
yet, but
morning.
we'll get to that.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
The Nathan Barley
Yeah.
of West London. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean that was it. You know, that was it for a few months. I lived at a friend's parents' place, you know,
Hmm.
out in the sticks,
Yeah.
which was lovely. But then, yeah, I needed to move, and of course, because um, I'm not particularly brave with stuff like this, so I did lots and lots of research, and I was like, I just don't want to end up somewhere where I'm sort of getting mugged every night. You know,
Mm.
I got other things that I
It's
need
the
to do
bare
in my life.
minimum, really,
Yeah.
isn't it?
I plucked for Chiswick in West
Mm.
London, which is
Yeah.
as quiet as you can get, and
Mm.
had a lovely house share there,
Yeah.
which was fun and stuff. And
But you were
you know,
living the life. I was stuck on Holloway Road for years, and like
yeah.
some dodgy flats. But you were kicking it in Chiswick. Yeah.
The worst thing about Chiswick was I think that on a Saturday you walked down the high road, you just couldn't move for, you know, yummy mummies and their sort of two across buggies. You know, you had to move out the road, and it's like, this is my biggest problem in London.
Yeah.
I'm kind of cool. I mean, you know, you know, I was living there when the riots all happened, you
Hmm.
know, down the road, and I was sort of
How
looking
did
out
you
the
know
window.
they happened in Chiswick though? Surely there was a
It was on the news.
Starbucks was shut for an hour.
Yeah. One police officer walked past,
Yeah.
you know, and I thought, oh, better check what's
Yeah.
happening. No, I mean, you know, I had friends who were in like East London. I mean, and
Yeah.
you know, I mean,
Internally.
at the end of the day, you know, Chiswick was only sort of half hour by car
Mm.
or like 45 minutes by tube to work,
Yeah.
which is the main reason I was there. But
Yeah.
like, even when I went over to somewhere in Brick Lane,
Hmm.
you know, it was like, oh my God, like, you know, I just couldn't picture myself sort of, you know,
What, living
God, I
around that
sound
sort of.
so hoity-toity, don't I?
Well, you are really posh. I mean, this was during your beret wearing years as well. So,
It
I
was,
didn't
yeah.
know. I didn't know. I'm trying to think how long I've known you for.
I think it was 2012, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I
it
think
probably was
first
around then. Yeah, probably was
first
around
met.
then. So yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't know you during your kind of wouldn't go to Brick Lane years, but you've chilled a lot since then.
Yeah. Oh, I
No,
love
but it
Brick
is
Lane.
different when you get used to
Yeah.
living somewhere nice. Because I moved down to
Mm,
various places I stayed. I moved down to Clapham Common at one point,
mm,
and we stayed at we had a really wicked flat, like right
mm.
overlooking the common and all that kind of stuff. And then
Yeah.
pretty much every flat or house I rented after that was just not nowhere near. It was always like,
Yeah. Of
it was
course.
that was always a
Yeah.
really really good place to live.
Yeah.
So after that, did you then sort of make the transition to British Airways from that job, or did you?
Well, no,
How did that work?
the job was British Airways. It
So
was,
it was actually.
yeah,
Oh right, sorry, I didn't quite. Oh yeah, I see.
yeah,
Okay,
no,
so you so and then you just stayed there.
pretty much, yeah. They
Yeah.
tried to get me out a couple. No, they. Do you know what? I need to stop being so self-critical. I think they liked what I did, and
Well,
you
obviously
know,
you were there for a long time, so
yeah. I mean,
they don't keep you around for
yeah.
that amount of time if you're not pulling your weight and
Mm,
everything. So like your sort of day to day when you started, because you've left now to do your own thing, haven't you? But like when you started, what was your day to day like? What sort of challenges did you face at that stage? Because obviously you knew you had your editorial background, that kind of stuff. But
mm,
when you're suddenly in that kind of, it's a highly corporate
mm,
environment where there's multiple things going on, like you said. You could be photographing planes one minute, or you'll be the other side of the airport doing a
mm,
photo shoot, a
mm.
customer facing thing. So, what sort of challenges did you find?
I think the biggest challenge was, you know, am I going to have a latte or a cappuccino every morning?
Mm,
I mean, that was the, you know,
yeah, or one of
that's
each.
a
And
battle.
how are you going to
Yeah,
hold your camera when you've got those two? It's
why not? Yeah. No, I think when I look back on it, I think I was absolutely 100% not prepared for the corporate world
Mhm.
and the role of creativity within it.
Yeah.
And I guess I, well, I mean, I was sort of lucky because the you know, there's been a long line of British Airways photographers, and the one who left to allow me to go into the job, I think he had just been burnt down by the whole system.
Had he been there for a long time then? Is he?
I think he had, yeah. And he, you know, going back to that creativity and, you know, trying to get the most out of every job. I mean, my attitude was always, well, if somebody's getting a certificate, why have they got the certificate? How can we make what they've done, you know, visually interesting?
Yeah.
And let's avoid, you know, is, you know, Bob or Sandra with the certificate. Whereas he was just like, oh, it's a certificate. Okay. Yeah. Bob, Sandra, get a bit closer, you know, shake hands. And I think that and especially with moving to a magazine, which, as you know, is a slightly different sort of style to newspaper work, you need to do things a bit more visually interesting, a bit more dynamic.
And telling more of a story with those things, I think sometimes. You know.
And I guess because, you know, the magazine has to live, if you like, for a month, you know, you can't have the same picture every single month of, you know, here's the winner of the latest certificate, you know, whatever it is. So so I sort of burst in. Well, I didn't really burst in, actually. My first day, there was huge snow in London, so I managed to get in, but then when I got to Waterloo, because I was going up to the agency's office to you know, go and check in and pick up my equipment and all that stuff, they were like, oh no, office is shut today, so you just go home. So I was like, all right. My first day at BA was,
you were at home.
Interestingly, my first day at the South Wales Argus, I was ill as well.
Yeah,
it's a thing. I think any future employers don't expect me in on the first day.
No, that's it. And weirdly, when you left BA, then a global pandemic started. So like just don't change jobs, Nick. Just stop moving around. It's causing it's unsettling the balance.
It's the Midas touch, I think.
Yeah.
I think that was the weirdest thing, is that creativity and the corporate world. I mean, look, if we're honest, it's a square peg in a round hole. I mean, you know, it will go in and they will join, but it's not as, you know, maybe smooth as, you know, if you're, you know, working in a wholly creative environment where I think, you know, the focus is purely on the creativity. There's a lot more sort of, I can't think of the word, but I want to say rubbish. That's the wrong word.
I know what you mean, though. It's like you've got the kind of, you know, let's say there's the A work, which is what you want to be doing. There's the B work that's okay, and there's the C work, which is like, we're just getting by now. This is the kind of baseline. And in all jobs, I think like that, where you're working for a big company, you're going to have a mixture of all that stuff. You always want the A's. You always want the A work, because that's where you thrive and where you want to live. But you have to do the other two as well. It's just part of the course. And, you know, I think, you know, I guess if you do it for a long time, after a while, maybe it does, you know, if you're doing a lot of C's, you know, a lot of C level, then maybe you're kind of like, actually, you know, there's only so many ways you can photograph that person with a certificate. But I also think there's something interesting about that, which is that when someone it's like having the same brief again and again and again. And what I find interesting about that is that sometimes, by, you know, when you've done it over and over and over, then suddenly something new sort of happens or materializes that you're like, oh, actually, that's another way to look at it. My only really real comparison is that I used to do a lot of work for Lacoste, and we used to do a lot of footwear ads and things like that. And you always wanted to be doing the footwear ads because that's the cool, funky stuff. And the sideline to that was that there were a whole load of brochures that had all the footwear in them, so pairs of shoes. And you're talking about, these brochures would go out to various places for people to kind of select the ones they liked, and then the majority of the ones they liked they would then create. So they're all kind of like dummy shoes, so none of the laces quite fit, you know, the logos were everything was so there was a massive retouching job, and you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of pairs of shoes, and you'd have to do these brochures, and we do them again and again and again and again, and when you've done like about 50 you've cut out about 50,000 pairs of shoes, it gets to a point where you're just like, what, you know, how are we gonna, how can we make this work? And then suddenly you know, you kind of push through and something miraculous happens, and it suddenly brings life back into it. So I guess, you know, whatever job you're doing, that, you know, that amount of volume over a longer period of time can be grinding, you know. It's
and I mean, I think, Yeah, I think I always took it as a bit of a challenge. I'm not gonna sit and pretend that, by the end there were certain jobs that you knew you could do, with your sort of eyes closed. I mean,
Sure.
those are mostly like the sort of headshots, just for people's profile pictures.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was quite handy because I think that the quickest that I ever did a job was about 30 seconds, and
Hmm.
that was from the moment somebody walking in, doing the picture, and then walking out again.
Yeah.
And you know, it's it's what they wanted.
Mhm.
It would be lovely to spend hours, like, doing a mood board, getting the light right. At the end of the day, you have a lot more, because even though it was taking pictures, there was a lot more around it that you had to do.
Yeah.
And you know so that was the other thing about being in-house, which I found quite interesting, really, is that you couldn't just be, like at the newspaper, I was a photographer.
Hmm.
um you know in BA, I was the photographer. I had to sort of help out with wider sort of comms. Towards the end, I was looking after like these digital displays.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, we
Which we
worked
worked
together,
on. Yeah.
didn't we?
Yeah.
And which sort of 10 years ago, it was so far off my
Hmm.
radar that I might be doing that. But
Hmm.
you sort of have to adapt and stuff. And of course, um, the other unique thing about working in house is your critics are all there. You can't
Hmm.
hide away from you are amongst your audience. So if you
Yeah.
take a bad picture or you get something wrong, somebody will put their
Pick
hand
you
up
up
and
on it.
say, I don't like it. Even if you
Yeah.
take a
Okay.
great picture, people will say, oh, well, I don't really like that.
Yeah,
And
and you
then
you would work in those big open plan offices with all these
yeah,
all interlinked in different ways. Whereas, this is why I work by myself in a small dark
yeah,
room.
yeah, yeah,
I just can't handle the
yeah,
criticism.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
it.
yeah.
But I think that's like, just going right back to where we started with, the concepts and ideas
Mm,
is always constant, but the technology changes and your
mm,
skill set has to change. So, like,
yeah, yeah,
aside from like just kind of doing your job while you were there and being creative
mm,
sometimes, and then just doing the kind of the lower level sort of day to day stuff at other
mm,
times, you were learning. It's like the
mm,
best. It's like the best course you could go on, because
yeah,
you're
yeah,
you're learning all about how to use these programs. You're learning about how to apply your ideas
mm,
in different ways. And like you said, towards the end of you leaving British Airways, we were doing a lot of like animation
mm,
type things for the
yeah, yeah,
displays and things like that, which I think just is just a prime example of how
mm,
that sort of
yeah,
can move your career along
mm,
in
yeah,
that way, and get you
yeah,
thinking in new ways, and thinking like, well,
mm,
for this particular project, it doesn't have to be just one image. It can
mm,
be a series of images, and
mm,
what are they, and how do they balance with each other? And
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I
no,
think
it's
that's yeah. I absolutely agree, and I think that um, I think the one thing that I took most of all out of the BA experience was, I guess, when I walked in, um, and you've worked with photographers, you know what we're like. We take a picture, we sort of hand it over and say, right, this is the greatest pictures ever.
mm,
Why aren't you using, the best picture and whatever? And I think that what I sort of developed, and I won't ever get it right 100%, but I started thinking a lot more about the designers and the people, that the end user of the photograph, and rather than just sort of go, here's the greatest photo that's ever been taken, it's like,
mm,
well, actually, this is the best picture for what you need it, so it
yeah,
fits with the digital display, or it fits with whatever
yeah,
graphic you were doing. So
yeah,
which, yeah, obviously you do a little bit of in the newspapers, but at the end of the day, the newspapers tend to be, that way
hmm,
or that way,
yeah,
and there's no in between. But when you get into much more creative circles, you sort of, you're trying to second guess the designer or the
mm,
person at the end of the end user of that photograph, which is it's quite an important skill to have, I think.
yeah. And also, yeah, I guess, and that's what we worked well together in the
Mm,
past. And they're like, I'll send you the scamps for something and say this could be a thing, and then
mm,
you'll be like, how about we do this, and then
mm,
we'll do the shoot, or you'll
mm,
do it by yourself, depending on how that works out.
mm,
And because you have an idea of where it's all kind of heading.
mm,
And I've worked with other photographers in the past where I'm like, here's a kind of rough
mm,
scamp, an idea of what I want, and then they've sent back, it's like, will be like a sort of 48 sheet billboard,
Mm.
and they'll send me like these portrait shots of people like head to toe, that
Yeah,
just
yeah,
don't,
yeah, yeah,
there's no
yeah.
consideration of how that
Mm.
works within the format, and how the concept carries over into these formats. So I think it's good to have that kind of, again, that's yet another creative part to yourself you
Mm.
probably don't give yourself enough credit for, which is that, like, you're thinking about the end product, whereas a lot of photographers are just like, nah.
Yeah,
It is,
yeah.
which is an important skill to have,
Mm.
because ultimately you
Yeah,
want it to look the best it can be.
absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, I think if you keep the designers happy, they always use your pictures in the best way. And what more do you want in
Yeah,
life? Not that
yeah.
that's not the only reason that I'm
Just keep
friendly with
me.
you, by
Don't
the
worry
way.
about them. Just keep me happy, Nick. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
No, but it does work out,
yeah.
and everybody ends up in a nice place then. And
Mm.
there's nothing worse than having a good idea that's not quite finished in the way it could
Mm.
be, or there's something letting it down
Yeah,
that
yeah.
detracts from that. So it's good to have to
Mm.
know where it's going. So let's talk about a piece of work that you've done that didn't go well.
Oh.
None of our jobs. I'm nixing those now because we could be here all day. And
No,
something
no,
you
no, no.
something you might like to go back to and revise, or not.
Okay, well, this one got me thinking as well. And actually, there was one absolute clear winner on this one. In 2006, I managed to make contact with a charity called Lepra, and they're a UK-based charity. My mum was working for them, so that was my in. And they obviously try to raise awareness of leprosy. It's a horrific disease. It's just
Yeah,
one of those sort of medieval ones that you can't quite believe is still,
yeah, that's still a thing. Yes,
affecting
yeah.
people. And I got into photography because actually I should have put this at the beginning. There was a film called Welcome to Sarajevo. I don't know if you
Yeah, no, I
remember it.
remember. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
do. Yeah,
That was the film that I watched. I was like, yeah, that's
yeah,
what I want to do with my
yeah.
life. Maybe not the war zones, but the thought that you could do something that made a difference. And I guess that was, maybe what first piqued my thoughts about photography and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. Can't remember what year that was, but
I'm right in thinking that's the one with the war correspondence where they're.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's the true story, isn't it? About is it McNichol? No, I can't remember his name now. But yeah, he went to Sarajevo. They covered this orphanage, as an ongoing campaign, and then eventually he brought one of the orphans.
that's
He
right.
smuggled
Yeah,
her out.
God, I
Yeah,
haven't seen
yeah.
that for years. Yeah, that's a good
Oh,
film. Yeah,
it's powerful, isn't it? And it's it shows what good visual arts can do.
mm-hmm.
Obviously, so I wanted to do something like that, and so I got the chance to go to India for a little while, and I visited a couple of the clinics that Lepra were involved in Hyderabad, and it was great. And I mean, they were brilliant. I mean, the fact they were giving me access at all, and this is another thing about the corporate world, is there's not a lot that you can do without somebody being on your shoulder or
Mm-hmm.
telling you where you can and can't go
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. And rightly so sometimes, obviously. But I went out there and I literally was given an address for one
Yeah,
of the clinics, and I turned up and I was given, sort of met the doctors, met the sort of the clinician director, and then started shooting some portraits of the people there. And it was, even now looking back on it, the pictures are quite powerful, but I
yeah.
guess I really wish that I was going back to do it now with everything that I know, because the
Okay.
first thing, I would spend a lot more time. I would probably not have done what I did, which was go straight into, shooting pictures. I would have tried to get to know people, get to know the stories, and,
Mm-hmm.
maybe not. Maybe I was treating it a bit more like a news assignment rather than a documentary
Okay.
assignment.
Okay. But I guess at that time, how old were you? How old were you then when you did that? So you
26.
were still in kind of editorial mode in a way. You were
Yeah,
still
yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Sort of thinking of, a 200 or 300 word story, illustrating that. So,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah. So I would like to have built more of a narrative, made it a bit more standalone than it was,
Yeah.
and spent more time there. And I think, they were so wonderful, and the hospitality was amazing. That maybe I was a bit worried that I was sort of in the way, or taking the mick or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the one that I look back on, that I think I wish that I could have done. Yeah, I would definitely do it differently now.
It's quite a unique experience and opportunity to go and do something like that. So when you see those, when you do it and you're like, actually, you did a good job, but now you do it differently.
Very much so. But aside from that, everything else was perfect.
Yeah. Well, that leads me on to question 7. Was let's talk about a piece or pieces of work that you are proud of. So just the rest. Question 8.
No, I mean, like I'm happy when like I say, the end user of the photo is happy, or if like we were talking about earlier, if the person who didn't want to have their picture taken has had their picture taken, and now they're over the moon, and it's all over their LinkedIn and Facebook, and Granny's got a picture of it printed on on the sideboard and stuff. I mean, obviously that's great. But there's actually,
I'd say you recently shot Prince Charles, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I mean, the Royal Rotas are always an interesting experience, because I mean, you sort of shuffled around in front of whichever royal you are photographing, and you don't really have any say in anything. You have to sort of just shoot as you go, and hope you turn your camera on and it's not pointing the wrong way, and it's just loads of selfies of your nose or whatever. So they're good, but actually the two that stand out in recent years. So the first one is, now I'm from Wales. I'm a proud Welshman, very, very proud Welsh rugby supporter. So part of the reason why I'm picking this one is because of my professionalism whilst on this job. But British Airways announced a partnership with the England Rugby Union, and a certain Welshman
coming on
was chosen to shoot the pictures.
There's a lot of these sort of shots of
it's a funny feeling, when you, because as you get a briefing, and I mean, you get it in, and you have to be sort of in the right frame of mind to get that creativity going. I always find it, and maybe I am alone, I don't know, but if I haven't slept properly, or got a bit of a cold, or I'm stressed about something, it's a bit hard.
All impacts, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, when I got that, obviously the Welsh fan in me sort of was like, oh man, we're spending a lot of time at Twickenham with England rugby people who are like wonderful, but in my mind I was always like, why couldn't it be Wales? Why couldn't it be in the Principality State? I would have just been there. You could have just left me with a tent down there. I would have just stayed and photographed every square bit of the Welsh Rugby Union. But anyway, so you take the job, and it was a really nice one, actually. So we had access to the pitch, the training room, and all these places still exist. Nothing bad went on. I didn't,
just shut it down for a while after you were there.
Just leave it Welsh flags everywhere. No, and it was great, and also we had, we were given permission to go on the pitch, which, if you ask any sports, anybody involved in sports, whether they watch it, one of the most prominent things in a stadium is do not step on the grass. I mean,
sure.
So, but
sacred ground.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was sort of like, oh, okay. And this was one of those ones. Now, we were talking about it earlier, that you sometimes get a bit of a, on the face of it, maybe a bit of a boring a brief come in, and there's nothing worse than a boring brief that's been created by people who don't really know the subject that they're briefing about. And rugby I don't know. You're not a rugby fan, though, are you?
Not really. I played a bit at school, not to any
Okay. Yeah.
level at all. Just like
Yeah. No. No.
during PE.
Yeah.
And I always enjoyed it, but
Yeah.
yeah, I've never really been. In fact, I'm not really a massive sportsman of any sort, really, like
Oh
football.
no, that's fine. That's
No,
fine. No, no.
I'm the little nerd reading comics in his bedroom, so while everyone's outside in the sunshine. So yeah, don't worry about that.
No. It's it's each their own. I mean, it just so happens that I'm a massive rugby fan. So of course, when I saw the list of pictures that had been requested, I was like, hang on, there's loads that you can do that within the context of a rugby match.
Yeah.
That are a little bit better than whatever it was that was on the brief. And I mean, I was really lucky that the team that was sort of behind this partnership trusted me. So when I said I'll have some better ideas when we get to the shoot, and so we went down to Twickenham, met the the most I mean, as you would be if you worked for England Rugby, massively enthusiastic guy about rugby. All the pictures on the wall seem to be Welsh rugby players getting very, very badly beaten up by England players.
Had they requested a Welsh photographer?
I don't know. But when you see your heroes you're sort of seeing your heroes with their head in their hands after England had just scored and celebrating. You're like, oh man, it was all quite surreal.
Trying to take your Welsh flag off your face when you were we'll be in there in a minute.
Yeah, I mean, the RFU guy really appreciated the dragon outfit that I turned up in, with the massive leaf.
Well, you just wear that anyway. It just happened to be.
Yeah. And he was great. I mean, he was a really good guy, and we had a chat, and I said to all this to him. I said, look, mate, I'm a Welsh fan. It's very uncomfortable. Twickenham frightens me, to be honest with you. And he was great. We chatted about rugby and stuff. And then of course I said, well, look, I've got these ideas, and one in particular sort of really caught the imagination of the RFU guys, and that was, it's one of those lovely moments when on the inside you're thinking, oh yeah, no, that feels right. That feels like that's the way that we're going to go. So we did the safe shots. We did all of the, here's the ambassador holding the rugby ball. And so we did that. And then we're getting towards the end of our time. And I said, right, we've got to get this picture that I want to do. And basically what I had envisaged, because we didn't have any rugby players, we had a rugby ball, and I think we had 8 ambassadors, I think, in full uniform. And what I wanted to do was, obviously in rugby, when the ball goes out, there's a line out and there's a lift. So one of the players gets lifted up to get the height. And I wanted one of the ambassadors to be lifted up to catch the ball, right?
Yeah, okay.
And obviously now, I'm not going to lie, it's quite a dangerous thing to do, even for the people who know what they're doing. You're a long way up, and the ground is, and so we picked one of the smallest ambassadors, and she's great. She's always up for this sort of stuff, and basically did some line outs with British Airways ambassadors on the pitch with Twickenham in the background. It was lovely, and it was one of those things. And we, I keep coming back to it. You get that feeling, and once you've got that feeling on a shoot, and then everybody else is then coming in with their own ideas.
They pick up on that energy when they're
absolutely, and you get a great shot. Now, unfortunately, the best shot didn't get used. That's one of those things. And it was actually the RFU guy one of the RFU ladies that came up with that idea, and it was just making people a bit more animated. However, when the pictures got back and they saw these ones, this ambassador with the ball up, and it was looking like a rugby, people were blown away.
Great.
And it was just like, it was a lovely feeling.
Yeah.
But what makes it the one that I'm most proud about is because it started off as a PR shoot. It sort of turned into a bit of marketing, which, the marketing guys were like, oh yeah, we really like that. And, that's great. And it ended up printed about 80 foot tall on the side of Twickenham Stadium.
You know what? You're talking about it. I know I've seen that photo. I haven't seen it from you. I know I've seen that.
Yeah.
And
and that's just, for me, that whole job
Yeah.
was just bonkers. It was
Yeah.
just like going from, you know, where we were through to getting a fairly decent picture
Mm-hmm.
to a Sunday afternoon where I'm,
Yeah.
you know, went down with Sarah and Ted and went, check out that picture.
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
big is
That's
that?
cool.
You know, like
Yeah.
that's awesome. And then of course it was one of those things. I don't know the specifics about, you know, the deal or whatever, but you know, I was told that it was a holding image until they
Mm-hmm.
got something, you know, that they were going to shoot specifically for the thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, hey, do you know what?
Whatever.
It was like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's the autumn internationals. You're still getting however many 80,000 people walking past, having a look at this, you know,
Yeah.
this
Yeah. Well, that
ambassador
must
up
have been
doing the
seen
thing.
so many times. That must have had so much
Well,
coverage.
exactly, yeah. And every time the Sky helicopter or the, you know, the BBC helicopter or whatever flew over the stadium, there's the picture.
Yeah, that's
Every
so
time we
cool.
went down the A316, there's the picture.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, not the 316, the A whatever it is down to the M3. You know, and it was like, wow, that's just mind blowing. That's,
But
you know,
that
that's
shows, like, you know, like we were saying before about having that skill of you can just shoot what people want. You can just do what they want. You can push that a little bit further, or you could just take a chance on an idea that you've got, and you know, it can be a hit or a miss. You know,
well,
and in
exactly.
this case, it was a hit, and you took an idea that somebody had, and you just elevated it to this other level that it cut through what it was originally meant for. It became this other thing, and then you know, because nobody thought he's going to go and take that photo, and it's going to end up on the side of the stadium.
No.
You know, it just kind of trickled through, and that concept and that idea that you kind of pushed to you know, your creativity brought out of that brief, just turned it into something great rather than something that was just destined to be good, you know. So I think
that was brilliant. Yeah,
that's really good.
And I mean, I think that the other thing about it is it was only meant to be up there for that one tournament. I think there's been at least 3 now. I think that they're still, and I'm pretty sure if you went down there today, I think they're still up on the thing now. For whatever reason it is. Yeah, maybe that's what it is. These really strong glue.
Yeah, I was going to say, there was a man with glasses and a beard gluing it one night. Just I couldn't identify him. Yeah.
So, but for whatever reason, it's still up there, and it's. I think it's, you know, out of everything I've done, I've never had anything displayed that big. You know, that's
so
just
cool.
You know, that's cool for me. So that was the first half of my proudest project. The other one, and I received your envelope full of fivers in the post this morning. It was actually
they're old. They're the old fivers.
The old fivers. Oh, right. Okay. I won't go into it then.
You can't use them for. You know, it's just to put on your wall. You can't spend them.
No. It was the Flying Proud work that we did for BA.
Okay. Yeah.
And again, it was one of those. Yeah, it was one of those great projects where it was sort of, you know, the brief was sort of, it was there or thereabouts, but it was just that whole collaborative process of being trusting, of going, right, you know, here's the sort of basic thing, go and make something amazing, Jay. And he went and did it, and then, you know, being involved in that shoot and all the effort that went into it.
That was fun because, like, I mean, obviously, just sort of, you know, a bit of history, which is that I wasn't even working for British Airways before we did that job, and you just randomly contacted me out of the blue and said, look, they're looking, you know, pitching for ideas for this thing they want to do for Pride, and and then I was lucky enough and I don't really do, I'm not a big fan of like pitches and things like that, because it, you know, that's a whole different conversation about how it hurts the industry and free work and you know, and all that stuff. But when British Airways come to your door and say, do you want to try and do this thing, like, you have to say yes, because it's such a, you know, the opportunity to get involved with any of their projects is just really, you know, it's great. Can
I just say other airlines are available?
Well, a lot of them are closing, so
some other airlines are available.
The names of which will be put down the bottom of the screen here, along with your flight times. So but that was a great one, because I sort of had that idea of the idea was basically was to bring some color into the photography, and it was sort of, again, they're essentially portrait shots, but it was all about bringing the kind of the rainbow colors into these shots in an interesting way. So we had like one lady had her nails painted in the different colors, and you know, and one guy was holding an umbrella, and again, And how that sort of bounced back is that, I had the idea, I send it to you, and you're like, oh yeah, that'll work. We can do this and such. And then we did the shoot, and the shots of the guy holding the umbrella worked great. But they're even better when you started saying, well, why don't we'll get some movement in there. Why don't you spin the umbrella when we shoot it? And we ended up using that shot for a lot of things, which again is another one of those kind of collaborative moments where I sort of had an idea of doing this, and you're like, well, how about we do this? And then it just layers and layers and layers, and ends up in quite a good place, And
oh, no,
yeah, that stuff ran for quite a while, and
well, yeah,
and
it informed every. I mean, because obviously the Flying Proud guys took it, but then there were so many other campaigns that then came up, and the first thing you'd see on the brief was, "Can we have it like the Pride campaign?"
Yes,
and it's
yeah.
like,
and it's funny because even like now, I mean, not today, because British Airways are kind of, they're going through a transitional phase. But I'm still working for them in some capacity of various bits and pieces, and even today, like people, they constantly refer to that campaign that we did, and and it was a lot of fun. And I guess that like you said, like to have it was such a sort of positive energy. Also, we were kind of lucky because it's such a positive thing. The topic, the concept, and the whole Pride thing is such and everyone wants to get involved in however they can do. And I think that's a good place to start to sort of have some fun with it. And yeah, no, it was good. It was good. There was a funny one, actually. Sorry, just to interrupt you. There was a funny one that one of the guys who was running the project sent me a photograph of, and it was it was like about 3 weeks later or something after the campaign had started. He was in Brighton, and Britney Spears was performing on stage, and our campaign was just running behind her. It was just on a loop behind her, and I was just like, you've made it when Britney's singing in front of your spinning umbrella.
Well, that's it. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about the collaborative creative process is you just that was only meant to be like an internal thing for BA, but it took off. But I mean, what I was going to say was that sorry, that pun about taking off just threw me then. I haven't done one of those for ages.
Does that happen a lot in the office of the BA? That's the way you eventually left. Like, I've had 10 years of airplane jokes. I've got to go.
I think that with that campaign, you're right that it was vibrant. It was a sort of not an easy subject. That's the wrong thing. It was a good subject to do a campaign around. But you think about how easy that is to get wrong, and how you can make that so sort of uninspiring and just sort of very corporate. Dare I say?
It can be that tone of voice you can get it so wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. So
I just had the idea, and then you did all the hard work. So yeah, it was great.
No. But then again, I think another thing about it, which I really liked, it was your attention to detail. I think that a designer who I knew years and years ago on the paper, he always said, design is in the detail, and the good designers are always about the detail. And like the thing about the fingernails, I hadn't thought about that, but it was just that little detail that it wasn't in your face, it wasn't that, but it was just enough, and it was just subtle, and it was lovely. And so those are my two sort of favorite projects in the last
that's good. I feel very honored to be I'm a bit upset I wasn't the first favorite, but
well, I was building up to the best one, wasn't
I? And finally we have no, but it was good, and I enjoyed working on that job. And so that was an amazing project. Thanks, Nick.
That's all right, anytime.
So there was no cut there whatsoever. No. So moving on to question 8. So what are you doing now? Because obviously you left BA, and what do you see for the future? Where are you going next? Because obviously
well, it's certainly an interesting time to be alive.
It's a tough time. I sort of wrote these questions before the pre-pandemic, and now it's like, what are you doing now? I'm just still in my room.
No, do you know what? I mean, I said to you that I wanted a challenge, and being the owner of your own business in the middle of a global pandemic is a huge challenge.
Yes.
I think I'm going to approach this in 2 different ways. So I'm going to approach it in what is actually happening in my life. So
Mhm.
yeah, at the moment, with a lot of photographers, a lot of creatives, there is not a lot of work out there at the moment. Um, and rightly so. At the end of the day, as much as I want to go out and take a picture and whatnot, we
Yeah.
got to stay off the streets. We got to make sure
Yeah.
we get rid of this thing.
For
So
now, I thought, and I
yeah.
mean, the good thing about being a photographer in some parts of that industry is that it is a solitary job. You're not always working with big groups of people.
Yeah.
So, it's not like you won't be sort of back in the field, if you like, at some point. It's the social distancing and all that kind of stuff coming into play. It can be a solitary life as a photographer. So
Yeah,
that's
no,
one
absolutely.
positive thing that's
Yeah, no.
as things develop.
Yeah, you are right. I mean, it's a very funny thing, isn't it? Because it is a solitary job, but I'm missing interacting with human. I mean, well, obviously the
Yeah.
two people who live with me are humans, but other humans.
Because I'm sick of these humans.
Yeah. I'm not really.
No, we all love
No,
our
hang on.
families.
No. What was the official line again? I'm loving every minute of. No. I do miss it. I do miss the interaction with, like we've said before, that you get that person who's nervous about being on camera, and the sort of, the fun that you have trying to get them on camera, and that excitement and stuff.
Yeah.
So that is tough, but I've got a lot more time to myself. It being full time, I didn't really have any time to sort of learn and refresh and think about things. So as sort of twee as it sounds, I've been like trying to get myself better at stuff to when I then am released back out into the wild. Yeah, that I'm ready to be better, because at the end of the day, I loved it at BA and it was great, but I think that I had hit the plateau that I was on the hamster wheel, and it's not a nice place to be, and you want to get out of it, but you just can't find the way. So this has been nice. So I mean, Ted, my little boy, has been modeling quite a lot for me, as I practice lights and stuff, and then he takes pictures of me, and so that's been really fun, and also trying to get all of the business stuff done that I should have done about 6 months ago. So I've been sort of making sure that everything is in the right place, so that when lockdown ends, and I really hope that there's a massive klaxon for that, some sort of like
the emails will just start coming in, the doorbell starts ringing. That's the dream.
Yeah, absolutely. So that I'm ready for it, and I think that if you ask anybody who's serious about it, they're doing it, and it's all we can do at the end of the day. And so it has been fun. I mean, obviously, what are we, week 7 of lockdown now?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I'm a bit out of sync because we were on lockdown a week before the lockdown happened.
Oh yeah, we were as well.
My little boy had a cough and cold, and at that point they were saying if he's got a temperature, you should all self-isolate for like 14 days or 7 or 14 days. We started like the week before, because why not? So it feels like a long time at the moment, but I'm hoping that things will change slightly. I mean, but like you said, I mean, I don't know about you, but I haven't stopped since I started work, like back when I was like sort of 21. So like I came down to London, and then I was just straight into it, and I haven't really had a break since then. It's always been full on, even when I worked abroad for you, which I thought was going to be a little bit more sort of time to reflect and do a bit of work. That was just full on as well. So like there was never a moment where I sort of had time to stop and think about what I'm doing, and just constantly moving forward, and while that was good, and I sort of thrive in that environment of like multitude of things going on all the time. This kind of forced exile has been quite nice, because I've been able to get this started, which I've wanted to do for ages. The minute I get a proper job come in, I'll never be on the YouTube again.
Oh no, I hope not, mate. I think you're natural at it.
but seriously, like I've wanted to sort of get this sort of stuff. So it's been nice to, like you say, have time to kind of hone those things down. And you as well, you've been spending you're very good at doing what I'm slowly learning how to do better, which is engage with social media, because like I'm always busy doing other stuff, and I've never got time for like Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and all that stuff. And then I started looking at that at the start of the lockdown. That's the first thing I started looking at. I thought, well, I've been meaning to try and up my game a bit, and I just realized how terrible I am at it, and like, you know, how many people I'm in contact with through work stuff and all this, you know, and different groups of people I'm friends with who I'm not linked in through social media at all. And I just thought it's time to kind of start honing that all down a little bit. And I think this is a good time to do it. You know?
I mean, LinkedIn is it's a funny one. There's, you know, I mean, I love Instagram. I think there's a lot of detractors about it. And well, I say I love. Instagram's in the doghouse with me at the moment because of this whole thing about the sharing of images and stuff, and you know, it's a bit shady. And I think as a photographic platform, they absolutely have to look after our copyright. You know, that's number one. You know, you can't be doing anything that, you know, sort of detracts from that or threatens the integrity of copyright. So I've been concentrating on LinkedIn, which is quite an interesting place. And I mean, but then it's the same with all these things. That it's all dark arts, you know, the whole social media thing is just, but it can be learned, and it can be, you know, if you spend a bit of time doing it, it's good. And
I think the trick with it, you know, is to, you know, what you're good at is being consistent with it. You know, I think you know, people just start getting used to seeing, you know, the kind of things you have to say and the things that you know, the kind of the enlightenments about photography that you kind of bring to these sort of like these sort of blogs and things, which are really interesting. You know, I think that's a good thing about the creative industry as well, is that actually it's quite nice to talk about that rather than just to bang on about the economy and all that stuff. You can talk about photos in a simple way. You can get highly complex with it. You can talk about ideas. You can, you know, and I think that's a nice, you know, it's a nice way, one, for you to kind of remind yourself that you do know these things, but also another way to engage with people that isn't all about like pushing them for work, or you know, it's just, or literally waving a flag on Facebook and saying, I've had a sandwich, you know, look at me. It's something informative and interesting that people can pick up and take down, you know, take in at their leisure. You know, you are good at that, and I think that's you know, that's another skill that I think is you know, overlooked.
You
know, like, so because if you're off the ball with that stuff even just slightly, then like you're out of the game, you know. So, it's stay on it.
I mean, well, as you know, there is so much content out there now. I mean, it's just absolutely mind-blowing. And you have to be consistent. You have to be consistently good, and you know, you have to be confident in what you're doing to, you know, to showcase. And you know, we all hate those emails where somebody says, "Oh, I'm going to solve all your problems for $10.99 a month." You know, so you've got to avoid that. But no, it's been great. But you know, hey, I'm going to be starting a podcast as well. I mean, you know, it's something that I've wanted to do, and
you should do it. I mean, like, you know, my kind of my thinking behind it originally was like, there are so many terrible YouTube channels out there and really crap podcasts. Let's make some more.
No.
You know? It's like, you know, I'm not pretending this is anything other than just a slight shambles that looks like it's cleverly put together, but the fact is it's just a whole mash of whatever, and we're just
isn't the official term for it, it's authentic? Isn't that what if it's not quite up to, you know, it's authentic.
It's the shabby chic of social media.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think that's you know, that is an interesting thing to, you know, to keep doing, because like I said, you know, it reminds people that you're there, and I think it's probably a good new, because I've always been quite bad at new business. I tend to rely on people leaving their jobs and going somewhere else and taking me with them, and that's how my business has functioned for quite a long time. And I tend to be luckily busy enough to not have to worry too much about it. But then when you start thinking about, actually, I should be in people's faces a bit more, but without being too pushy, it's quite a good tool to kind of.
Of course. No. Well, and podcasts, I mean, you know, if you look at the range of tools that, you know, communicators are using, I mean, podcasts are quite an interesting concept, you know, because I've only just recently got into podcasts, and a lot of my friends have only just recently got into podcasts. And actually, when you find an interesting one, you know, it's quite a compelling, you know, because you can do it when you're,
Yeah.
you know, doing whatever it is. It's like listening to the radio, but
Hmm.
actually listening to something you want. And I mean, you know, the one that stands out in the last couple of years was the 13 minutes to the moon that the
Okay. Yeah.
BBC did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was when I was listening to that I was like, yeah, actually, this is, if you do it properly,
Mm.
it's a really, really powerful thing. So,
Yes.
you know, if you can offer a podcast to any of your clients, then, you know, you're sort of onto a
Yeah,
winner, really.
definitely.
So,
And I also think with this, because I've listened to podcasts for like years, because I can't stand the radio. I can't have
mm,
like Radio 1 on while I'm working. It just drives me bonkers. Like
mm.
they just talk crap all day and then they play songs I don't like.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
like it's
yeah,
just,
yeah,
it's just
yeah,
not going to work. Whereas
yeah.
like I find a podcast that I like that's got a good
Mm,
topic, and now it's got to the point where I have, depending on what I'm doing,
mm.
dictates what kind of podcast I'm listening to. Like,
Oh, wow,
so if I'm
okay.
trying to be healthy, if I'm going for a run, I'll just stick on, some guys talking about like Xbox gaming or something for like half an hour, which is just total
Nice, nice, nice.
mundane, sort of,
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
biplane flying overhead,
yeah,
like just this drone, but it's just distracting
yeah,
enough that,
yeah.
or like similarly like this podcast, the only person that will probably listen to it will be me in about 30 years time.
And my mum and
So,
dad.
yeah. So
Yeah.
hi, Nick's mum and dad, and hello, future me.
Yeah, yeah.
Keep running.
And for viewers of Dave, viewers on Dave, the lockdown was something that happened 30 years ago that
Yes,
people
exactly.
started doing podcasts.
No. What you mean is, viewers of Dave, the lockdown is that something that's still happening 30 years ago, started
Yeah,
30
that's
years
true.
ago.
Oh God, what a depressing thought that
Yeah,
is, isn't
yeah.
it?
So
So you've not been doing Joe Wicks's PE then in the mornings?
no, I've no one's been tuning into mine. I'm on the other channel. It's just a sort of middle-aged man looking a little bit hot and sweaty,
Do you know
occasionally
what?
having to have a rest and a cream egg.
It's so funny. I was this is a bonkers segue from Joe Wicks to LinkedIn
Mm,
to improving my life, right?
yeah,
But bear with me. So we do Joe Wicks every morning. Me and
yeah,
Sarah do it,
yeah.
and I think I never really sort of bothered with him before. I don't know. You
Mm,
know, I knew who he was and stuff, but I think he's got such a great character that it comes out that there is something that draws you in, that you're like, yeah, do you know what? It's great. I want to do some Joe Wicks.
yeah,
Anyway, so somebody who I know on LinkedIn put a picture up and started talking about exercising. So of course, me being, thought I was, being sort of, clever, said, oh, well, I do Joe Wicks every morning. And, and I'm not an athlete. I find the Joe Wicks thing, it's quite punishing, It's,
yeah.
at
Okay,
the end,
yeah,
you got a sweat on, and
yeah,
you're bright red, you look like a lobster,
yeah.
and and it's he never does. I don't know how he manages it, but
Filters. It's all filters
yeah,
and stuff.
it could be, couldn't it? And so I said, oh, I do Joe Wicks, and it's great, blah blah blah. And somebody commented on it and said, oh no, we don't do Joe Wicks. It's too difficult for us. So we do Andy's wild workout, right?
Right.
And on CBeebies is Andy Day, who does
Okay. Yeah.
Andy's Safari Adventure,
Yeah.
Dinosaur.
Yeah.
So he does a little 7-minute one,
Oh.
right? Which we got Ted to do the other day, and it's literally just waving your arms around. And
Okay. Cool.
I don't think you're going to actually get any mass
Yeah.
out of it, but it gets him moving, and it gets his heart, gets your heart rate.
Well, that's cool
So
though. I think like that,
yeah,
that is good, because also
that's
it's not just about the exercise. There's something about collectively knowing that across the country and the world, people are also doing that at the same time.
Yeah,
because we're also used to watching. When I was a kid, if you're watching He-Man on TV, everyone's watching He-Man on TV. TV. Whereas now it's like everyone, multitude of box sets and Netflix. Everyone's watching different stuff at different times. There's something nice about this feeling of like everyone coming together and doing this. And the Joe Wicks thing has been, people have poked fun at it, and I actually think it's amazing. I think he's doing an amazing job. I think he's likable. If he's not knighted or given something at the end of the year for it, I mean, and he deserves it, because and the kids, like my wife and kids, they do it, and I haven't actually, hand in the air, I haven't done it yet. Those sort of things bring everyone together at this time. It's quite important. quite an
Yeah.
important thing.
And Joe, if you're listening, thank you very much for everything
Thanks,
you're
Joe.
doing. Thanks, Joe.
You keep
Thanks.
my family busy for about 20 minutes and then they're back again. Can you make it 40 minutes next time? So yeah, I guess we're moving. Okay, we're closing in on the end. Close to the end that I can't actually remember what the last question is. I did send it to you.
Let me see.
Oh no, we're in the penultimate one. We haven't done the. Do you have any advice for anyone starting out in the industry? Maybe something you would have liked to have known before you started.
Okay. Oh, well, before I answer that, I've just got to finish my notes from question 8, which is, I want to help small businesses. I'm also quite keen on other mediums. There we are. I just smashed those.
That was so natural. You're so natural reading that. It's amazing. Right. It's off the cuff, just like that. And that's the magic of creativity. It's like you can just come out at any point.
I wasn't checking my notes at all. Right. But actually, genuinely, I do want to help small businesses. I think that you've enlightened me to it. I think that I've now entered this realm out of the large corporate, global sort of thing. That there's this wonderful array of small businesses out there doing some cool stuff. And so if I can help in any way, obviously that's going to be great.
I mean, it is fun running your own business. I mean, it is hard, but the benefits of of it all are just great. And it's scary at first, but once it gets going, I mean, and it can be scary while you're doing it as well. It's not, it's a rocky road, but you just the only difference is how the work sort of comes in waves rather than a consistent grind every day. And for creatives, I think that's quite good because I'm not creative between 9 to 5 every day. I'm creative at different points, and sometimes I want to work into the evenings because I'm working on something that I want to continue, or or maybe one morning it's not quite working, so I can flip over to do something else. There's nobody dictating to me what I should be doing, and I think in that way the creativity sort of feels much more natural and more malleable, and I think you'll find that doing it for yourself as well, which is you can sort of suit yourself in that way. It's good. Definitely recommend it to anyone.
All right, cool.
So advice for people,
back to the advice,
starting out in the industry. So if there's anything that you maybe something you would have liked to have known before you started. See, it just flows.
Well, this is quite an interesting one. This was, out of all the notes that I made, this was the longest one. And I think that the first thing that I'm going to say, it's a little mini rant, something that drives me absolutely bonkers when you speak to some photographers, is that you get the stock response of, photography's dead, don't do it. Right. And it's like, well, yes, things are more difficult than they've ever been. However, even when I was getting started, it was tough to get into. It's always been tough to get into. Now, whether that's like we were talking about earlier, the technology and the knowledge that you needed to even know how to technically use a camera when it was all manual and film and stuff, it was difficult. It's difficult with digital. It's difficult that, like you say, everybody's got a camera in their pocket, and suddenly, it's like, people think they're David Bailey or whatever, and it's always been difficult. So my first bit of advice is ignore the people that are saying it's dead. It is like any other profession. I'm sure that there are people out there that tried to get into photography. They didn't, just because they didn't have the talent, or they didn't have the drive, or they didn't have the whatever. But it's the same as bus drivers, pilots, astronauts, whatever it is. Photography is not alone in being a profession that people can't get into. So what I would say is stay positive, have the drive, have the determination to see it through. It's tough, of course it is. But if you've got the talent and you are determined, you will find your way in photography. So that's my first rant of that. And I suppose sort of following on from that is don't expect to become a millionaire because at the end of the day, I mean, and I love like David Bailey, right? For every David Bailey, there's probably about 20,000 Nick Morrishes out there. I mean, it's like, you know, I would love to be a household name. I would love it that somebody says, oh, you know, you've got a camera in your pocket. Oh, who do you think you are? Nick Morrish. You know, it Bailey is up there in the stratosphere of photographers, and very few people will get into that strata. So
sure.
Don't put your pressure, don't pressure yourself. Just
Yeah.
do what you can. You know, if you can, you know, sort of live quite happily, and you know, do it. It is a great profession. You know, there is, like we were talking, the A, the B, and the C jobs. You know, it's like a triangle. You get loads of A, loads of Bs, loads of Cs. But when you get those A's, like really, like pull yourself into it, because they are the best. You know, the best ones.
No, that's good advice, and it does. You know, I think it also it says a lot about the sort of creative industry in general. Like you're saying, you know, you can you might not make loads of money at it, but don't forget you're doing a job that's really creative and interesting. And you could have a really dull job that you want to be creative, but actually you're just like, well, I'm just going to do this job because it makes money, and you know, doesn't necessarily make me happy. And I think for me, when I was looking for starting a career, I wanted something that did both, so I could pay for things, but I could also do you know, creative things at the same time. And thankfully we live in a world where that is a possibility. And maybe our parents didn't live in such a world, but we do, and the next generation even more so. You know, you say photography's dead, I say the opposite. I say it's never been more alive. Everybody's a photographer now. 90% of people are bad photographers, and that's only good for the good ones, you know. I think it's a good time to be a photographer, you know.
Well, that is an interesting take. And I mean, I always enjoy speaking to, you know, photographic allies, if you like, you know. I mean, but then you must find this as well with graphic designers. I mean, like that, you know, there are so many, you know, like, you know, I've got a Mac, and there's like some, you know, iTunes or not iTunes. God, I'm really showing my age now, aren't I? You know, there's some program on there that, you know, will do stuff.
The Adobe suite and all that stuff. Yeah.
Well, not Adobe so much, but you know, well, I suppose even on your phone now, you could do a basic graphic design. You could put text on it. You know, you think of a.
You know, this is actually dovetailing very well into John's question from the last podcast.
Oh, do you know what? Actually, I've got one more bit of advice. If you want to cut.
Okay. Let's do that
thing
first.
So my last bit of advice actually feeds into something that you were just sort of saying, is that everybody's a photographer, but 90% are bad and 10% are good. So the best thing that you can do is really be inspired by the great photographers. So even though how we take pictures and the technology that we take pictures with has changed, at the end of the day, it's still light, you know, hitting a sensor of some sort and capturing that in an attractive way using shutter, aperture, ISO, and a particular lens to get a look or whatever. It will never ever change. But so what I would say is go back to the masters, you know, and I've written down some names, and this is not an exhaustive list, but your Henry Cartier-Bresson, your Don McCullen, Elliot Erwitt, Steve McCurry, Robert Capa, David Hearn, David Bailey, LaChapelle, Brian Duffy, and Brian Harris are people that I look to, try to emulate. And they were doing stuff that they would be doing the same thing now with an iPhone or with a camera or whatever. They've got the eye, and the eye is what separates the great photographers from the average and stuff. Like John Lennon said, isn't it? You give me I'm an artist, give me a tuber and I'll get you something out of it. It's the same with, you know, I've seen some great pictures on iPhone.
He also said, I am the walrus, so I'm not entirely sure.
That's true. So yes, they're my top three, you know, top three tips.
That's good. That's good. And you're right. I like that, referring back to the masters. That's something that, like, you know, in design, you're constantly doing that as well. Looking back at, you know, there are a few still around today, but the good ones, you know, you've only got to pick up some of those. You know, like Paul Rand, and look at some of his work, and it still stands up today, and it's better than some design that comes out today, and that was a century ago. So it's
I mean, I love all the you know, like Art Deco stuff, and you know, the old jazz records. I mean, like the design of that stuff is like, you know, I don't know who was doing them, but I mean, that's amazing. It's beautiful to look at.
So but that does dovetail nicely into our question, because I believe, if I remember correctly, that it was about whether the the technology is overtaking like the drive and concept within a person, and whether what you thought about that in terms of which is kind of what we started talking about with the iPhones, which is like, you can be a good photographer. We can have an iPhone that has an app that takes care of all of that stuff, and what differentiates the two.
So this is a really interesting question, and I mean, I'm gonna start sort of outside the creative world. I had a chance a couple of years ago to listen to a futurist talking, right? And futurist is somebody who says, well, this is what the future is going to look like. This is what the thing. And, I remember I sat back and I thought, oh God, here we go. It's going to be all about, it's computers, it's AI, there's no need for humans. You'll all just be sitting at home while, Arnold Schwarzenegger walks into your back garden,
He's there now.
Yeah. Well, I am in LA. Yeah.
He's cleaning the pool. He's hard up for cash.
Yeah. And I honestly thought she was going to say that. And what she said really, really surprised me is that there is a real focus to make sure that, as great as technology is, that humanity stays central to everything that we do with tech. And it's great that tech makes our lives easier, keeps us better connected and all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, we can't lose the essence of being human beings. And so, especially in terms of photography, I almost go back to what I said at the start, which is, you can be as technical as you like. There's a feeling and there's an emotion that you need to have and to understand and know how to capture that makes you a great photographer. Now, a robot could take a picture. I mean, there's probably a photo taking robot out there, but will the robot understand enough about human emotion to have that sort of subtle back and forth that you need? If you're photographing somebody who's nervous, you don't want some droid just banging on at you.
It's the nuances going on between the two of you that makes the difference between a successful shot and let's say.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so that's why if you go on Instagram and you type in iPhoneography as a search or whatever, there are some beautiful pictures that people are taking on iTunes mobile phone, whatever it is, iPhone. I was about to say iTunes, iPhone. Other phones are available, of course,
but not endorsed on this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. But and they're amazing pictures because somebody's seeing somebody's seeing a scene and they're understanding what needs to go into that. Now, I'm not denying it won't happen in the future, that robots will be able to do that and stuff. But for the time being, I think at the end of the day, behind that technology, you need a human. You need a human making emotional decisions. Same with graphic design. It's the same in everything. You need a human to make those decisions.
Yes.
Technology makes it easier, but it's not the be all and end all.
And I think that where people get a little bit confused in that respect is they, some of the design work, especially that does end up being sort of technologically led, tends to be, unless they've got the balance right with the concept from the start, then it just falls on its face for me. There has to be an idea to start with that eventually trickles down and can be done in this amazing technological way.
Yeah.
But I think John mentioned about pressing a button and the design comes out. I think I don't think we shouldn't ever get there, and if we do, that's a scary place because, like you said, it takes the humanity out of it and the understanding out of it, But I mean, inevitably, hopefully, everything gets better together. So technology helps the concept, and the concept feeds into the technology, and this demand just drives better photographs, better design.
No, absolutely. I mean, I'm not I'm not too worried about it at the moment. I think maybe it will change in the future. Obviously the technology you know, in terms of cameras,
Mm.
I mean, you know, I started off on film cameras, and I
Sure.
don't feel old, and now I'm, you know, fully digital, and it's sort of, it's a big moment when I'm like, oh, I'm going to shoot some film now, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
whereas before it was just like, oh yeah, you know, get some film out the
Well, it's
fridge.
like listening to vinyl, isn't it? It's like you can listen to your iTunes, but then, you know, you listen to a good vinyl, and like the difference is there, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I am one of the
Sorry,
vinyl.
this has turned into a podcast from 1965.
Yeah. Welcome to the future.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think you're right. I think with the vinyl, and this is the thing. This is the thing for me, and I'm probably going to upset a lot of people now. But
there's only 4 people listening.
Oh, okay. All right.
Us.
So, sorry, Mum and Dad. No, I mean, you know, the thing that absolutely grinds my gears more than anything is when people put technology as the be all and end all of absolutely everything. I think it's got a place, and you're exactly right. It's that balance. You've got to get it right, because there are people who I've known who have sort of worshipped at the altar of technology as the end, that everything else is the means,
the solution for everything. Yeah.
And it's not. It's just as sort of fallible as human beings, you know. I mean, you know, laptops break, phones break, you know. It's not the answer, but in a considered approach, I think it can be, you know, it could be, you know, useful in the future. Well, more than useful, obviously it's going to be central, but get that balance. But if you think about it, I suppose, like, you know, the Industrial Revolution, I mean, we're clearly in another, you know, what should we call it, technological revolution, I
guess
suppose.
so, yeah. But it's been going on for, probably from the 70s onwards. We probably have been, you know.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's but the Industrial Revolution changed things, but it didn't take the humans out of it. You know, it wasn't like humans stopped. It changed the way people did stuff, and I think that that's what we're in now. But it won't stop humans being humans.
Yeah.
So
there's your answer, John, if you're listening. We have the second part of question 10, which is your turn to ask a question to the next one. I do love it if you just like, what colour socks are you wearing? Just keep it simple. When I asked John, I thought like he was just going to come out with a how you're dealing with working at home with a, you know, but he was like, he clearly spent too much time thinking about it, and for a lot, I fear that question he'd been thinking about well beyond the time I even thought about doing a podcast. He wanted to ask it. Which is a great question. You know.
Yeah, thanks for that one, John. That was I really had to think about that. I was like, oh well, I'm wearing white socks today.
So you like the fact that I sent that one to you? Like all the other questions were just like, where did you go? How did you do? And then this morning I sent you that question.
Yeah, no, I was that got me thinking. Actually, I asked my 3-year-old, and he gave most of the answer to that one.
But did he just text it to you? He didn't speak to you. He just did it on his phone.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he Snapchatted me.
TikTok.
Yeah.
So the next guy coming, I think, is going to be a creative director. I think, guy or girl.
Well, this is the thing. Well, you know, I feel like I've been doing a lot of talking. I've not asked you any questions.
No, don't worry. I'll bore myself in my own time.
Well, so I'm this is a question that I'm going to throw both to you and to the creative director that follows, or the creative that follows. So basically, I know that, you know, as a photographer, there's lots of photographers that we do things, and let's face it, each of us in our own little thing thinks that we're the center of the creative universe. So more of a practical question, but now I feel a bit like I'm shortchanging the next person with not having a bold theological sort of thing. Fine. But it's, what is it that photographers do that annoys you most?
Do I have to answer this now? Because I've got a list. What do photographers do that?
And I suppose this is a bit of an addition to the, you know, what advice, you know, you give. I think that you should never look at photography on its own, especially not now. It's part of a creative process, and so, you know, it's all well and good going, oh, well, a designer doesn't know what a bloody picture looks like anyway.
Yeah.
Because we all work together. So so what is it? So if you're telling a young photographer what a designer wants or a creative director wants, what is it? and I'm just going to take
I
notes.
think we did talk about it earlier, and it is something that bothers me. I'm glad you brought it up, Nick, because I've been meaning to speak to you about this. No, but I think it probably is, and it's something that you and I have worked very well. And I've worked with other photographers where it doesn't work so well, which is that I like that kind of working, collaborating sort of job where here's an idea and then the photographer builds on it and then I build on it, and then it just becomes this kind of organic thing that solves the brief. But for me, it's when a photographer doesn't do that. It's when they have the opportunity to push something a bit further or maybe interject a little bit of themselves into it, but they would rather turn to me and say, is this what you want? And 9 times out of 10, it's like, yes, that's great, we'll just move forward. But there's always a little bit of me inside that's like, oh man, if you'd have just done, I'm sure you had an idea at some point today about something else that still fitted with this. Why didn't we just do that? And by that time you've got no time, and there's things are moving on and the job progresses and whatever. But maybe it's partly down to my ability to brief people very minimal level of like, just do something, but then I also think that that is a frustrating thing where people are in this sort of photographers are in this creative industry and they don't always put themselves out there, and that's probably more to do with 2 things. Experience might be one, and the other is just self-confidence. If you're starting out and you don't want to upset anybody, you're just going to tick boxes, whereas here's the 3 pictures that you asked for, and here's the guy wearing his galoshes being covered in in hose water. I think that's and that I think that probably is my sole issue with having worked with photographers in the past, is them not trying to put a bit more of themselves into it, sort of creative level. So
no, I mean, I understand.
I totally had that written down, by the way.
Yeah, no,
it's all here.
Yeah, he's going to ask a question.
Nice one for sending it over earlier.
Yeah, what does he want? I think it's quite an interesting one, because I mean, I certainly, very. It's funny now. You're right. You do sometimes turn around and say, "Oh, is that what you want?" And it's like what the art director or the creative director or the designer wants might not be right photographically, and you can see that there's that, but then the photographer might be thinking, oh, hang on, well, I'm just here to take the picture, I'm not dealing with the wider concept. So it's more collaboration, isn't it, really?
I guess it's also about, and something that I learned, which I did a lot of early in my career, is about being a pleaser, because you want to get on with your job and your career and all that kind of stuff, but you also have to stay true to yourself. And I guess if you're constantly being the yes man, then you're not helping anybody, really. You're not helping yourself creatively, and you're not pushing the idea forward for whatever it is you're working on. So don't be a pleaser. If you listen out there, kids, don't be a pleaser. So I think that wrap that.
And on that note,
drop mic. I think that might be the 10 questions. So thanks very much for taking part. I'm going to ask you how people can see your. I mean, we're 2 hours in now. We've lost our listeners, so I'll have to put the website on that at the start. But, how can people see your work and whatever other stuff you're promoting, or things you're doing?
Well, the best way to see my work is to shut your eyes and dream it.
And you say you're not busy.
This is all I've been doing for 7 weeks. My website is www.nickmorrish.com. Note the H on the end of that. I would also like to add that I'm not the Nick Morrish composer that comes up at the top of the Google SEO instead of me.
So is that why so many people looking for photography end up with a musical arrangement?
A concerto, I'm desperate to meet the guy, though. I think it would be really lovely to, do a collaboration or something.
He's probably got loads of emails addressed to you, and he's just like, I'm not a photographer.
That's where all my work's gone.
There's a composer running around the fields of Wales taking pictures, going, "This is not right."
And I'm doing 7-string concertos. No, so so nickmorrish.com, which I hope will be in the comments or somewhere, because
I'm gonna on all these things I'm gonna put, like, in the descriptors, I'll put a whole load of details and stuff down. So your home address, mobile number, that kind of stuff, So.
Perfect. And then obviously if you're an Insta kind of, down with the kids, my handle is Photographer, which is because I was nicknamed Frog in school, which remains to this day, and I'm a photographer, so Frog Raffer. Yeah,
it's good. It's good. I've seen your Instagram account. It's good. It's very good.
Oh, thanks, mate.
It's all good.
Yeah, nice. I'd be a bit worried if you said it was rubbish.
Yeah, well, we're still recording. Yeah, it's great, and I thoroughly recommend you. But it's very good. It's very good. Cool. And it's always great to work with you.
Yeah,
we can. So.
Yeah, and likewise, I can't wait till somebody sees sense to get us both in to do.
Yeah, we will. It will happen. I think, you unfortunately, with your kind of leaving your previous job and starting your business and the pandemic that's gripped the world, it's just it kind of puts everyone in this kind of weird holding pattern. And I think it will gradually start to get better. And I know there are jobs on the horizon that could turn into something.
Yeah, no, cool.
No, any excuse to email you. So, so thanks very much, Nick. I'm sure I've said that 5 times already, but
thanks, mate.
You getting involved in everything, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thanks a lot, mate. No, it's great. See you soon.
And there you have it. So thanks for hanging in there with me. Now, if you would like to get involved with any of these interviews, or if you have any questions that you'd like me to include to ask some of my guests, then please do get in contact with me. The best way to do that would be to hit me up on Twitter. So my handle is J@LoveDeadline, which is JAY@LoveDeadline, all one word. And I'll get back to you. Now, the next Creative Lockdown interview that I'm doing is with a creative director that has 3 decades of design experience under his belt, and he's also a very good friend of mine, like they all are. So please do tune into that one, because I think it'll be quite a good one. But for now, as always, be good, stay safe, and be kind to one another.